It's the Security Weekly News, and it is episode 250, if you can imagine that. That's a lot of episodes. Welcome to the week of 23 October 2022. We've got Fibonacci lasers, the mark of the web, TypoSquatting, malvertising, death to 486, AI coding, CISA, Apple, all that, and Jason Wood on the Security Weekly News.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week. Your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News.
Managing and protecting the world's grueling number of endpoints, enabling Tanium's customers to see, control, and protect every endpoint everywhere. Tanium's mission is to provide certainty in uncertain times with the industry's only converged endpoint management. Trusted by the U.S. military and the majority of the Fortune 100 today, Tanium helps manage and protect nearly 30 million endpoints. Tanium, the power of certainty. Visit securityweekly.com/Tanium to learn more. Right now, everybody is talking about cryptocurrency, and the cyber criminals are hiding in the conversation. Cyber criminals use social engineering loaded with urgency and fear to successfully prey on your company, your employees, and your customers. Spear phishing is just one of the 13 types of email threats. Barracuda has identified 13 types and shows you how you can protect your company, your customers, and your reputation. Find out about the 13 email threat types and Barracuda email protection by going and getting your free ebook at securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda. All right, I'm Doug White, and it's the Security Weekly News. Well, an exploit in the Mark of the Web feature, very ominous sounding name. I like it, but it's very ominous, the Mark of the Web. But the Mark of the Web is in Windows. And basically this exploit is that, and it actually goes way beyond this, but initially they reported that it was a JavaScript, that you could run a JavaScript file that would allow you to bypass the Mark of the Web security warning. So if you don't remember what Mark of the Web is, it's a Windows feature that actually flags files that you've downloaded. So when they're downloaded, they put a flag on there so they can send you a warning if you try to run them. So you've seen those little things pop up, or you've seen it go into a certain mode or whatever. And, so this was a reminder to handle this file with care. The particular feature that they have, the way it works, is what's called an alternate data stream. And alternate data streams in NTFS data file management systems are basically a way that you can actually set aside additional space and attach that to a file that it's not actually run when you execute a file or whatever, but you can actually go see it. So it's quite interesting. And this particular one is called zone.identifier data. And so, alternate data streams have been used to link other information, or to link alternate information, to link misinformation. They're always popular topics in forensics classes because people could conceivably hide, messages and things there. But it basically connects, by putting a colon at the end of the file name, and you can get to that. And it's been around a long time, and it can be used maliciously, but it was really designed for what they're doing right here. If you run dir/r on a directory at the command line, you can actually see the alternate data streams listed there. So they do pop up, but they don't normally. If you just run a dir, or you just pull up the screen, you won't see them. So the Mark of the Web feature pops up a warning when you try to open a file that was marked as such. It also used to trigger protected view for files in Office and things like that. But alas and alack, HP Threat Intel team found that Magniber ransomware was being used to infect devices using JavaScript files. And Allegiance, sorry, that's a hard one to say. And Allegiance found that the attackers were actually signing these .js files with a malformed key. And when they did that, it caused the security warning to not run. So it didn't, Windows doesn't prevent you from executing malware, but it does pop up this warning. But when they put this malformed key on the end of it, it basically didn't do that. And then the script that installed Magniber would actually run. So because you weren't paying attention and you just double clicked the file. So a proof of concept was developed and published, and then it was later found out that not only could you just run .js files this way, but you could run any Authenticode signed file, which includes executables or anything else, and the warning did not appear. I mean, like I said, the warning doesn't do anything except to remind you that you might not want to go ahead, but you can still run it and say ignore and just keep running it anyway. But it does remind you to take a look at what's going on when you're downloading files. Now, if your users are hot on the heels of some Nigerian prince that's going to give them billions of dollars, they probably won't slow down to read the warning message before they click go ahead. But at the same time, the warning is kind of useful. Not a huge vulnerability, but it's kind of an interesting one. A massive TypoSquatting campaign is apparently going on with over 200 domains impersonating 27 different brands, all of which trick people into downloading various pieces of malware on Windows and Android platforms. Now, if you don't recall, and I know a lot of you are expert on all this stuff, but some viewers don't know all these things. TypoSquatting is essentially where you take a website name like MicroSift, and you list that one. And MicroSift used to be a notorious porn site that if you accidentally type Microsift instead of Microsoft, you end up there. And on Western keyboards, the I is right next to the O, so it's very easy to type Microsift, and most of us have probably typed it quite a few times down through history. Some of us got rude surprises when we typed it by accident in public displays. But TypoSquatting is usually just something that's either visually similar to the actual domain name or has some kind of, and there's all kinds of variants of this too, right? Like Punycode and stuff like that, where they put undisplayed characters and things in the domain name. Cloning a website, well, that's pretty easy. So grabbing the main login screen off Microsoft Office or whatever is a pretty easy thing to do. So if I clone Microsoft by Microsift, and then I send and email people from Microsift, sending them to Microsift, a lot of people probably won't notice that. Now, and incidentally, note that Microsift.com now redirects to Microsoft.com, so I'm presuming they bought it from the porn company, probably at great expense. Another famous one was Whitehouse.com. I actually fell victim to this. I was doing a lecture to 2,000 people with giant screens, introducing them to the internet back in like 2000. And I actually said, and for instance, one of the useful things of the internet might be to go to whitehouse.com. And I typed it in, and it was like graphic. Yeah. And everybody started laughing. And I turned around and looked at the giant screens and got a little, like physical anatomy lecture there going on. But fortunately, I didn't get fired over that. Anyway, Cybele published a report which mentioned Google Play, APK Combo, PayPal, VidMate, Snapchat, TikTok, and a whole pile of other ones. Bleeping Computer then did more analysis on it and found that there were many domains beyond the ones that Cybele reported that were also apparently being used this way, and they included additional ones like Thunderbird, Visual Studio, Notepad+, NinjaTrader, Quattro Casinos, and again, they had a big long list. For instance, the one for Notepad Plus uses the domain notepads with an S ++.org, which is very similar to the actual one, which is notepad, no S, ++.org. And it's pretty tough when you're typing things to notice that extra S or not. And of course, they're sending out links. So you glance at the link like they teach you to in the anti-phishing school, and you go, oh yeah, I checked it. I hovered over it. Everything looks okay. But anyway, these downloads install Vidar Stealer in some cases. Other cases had Agent Tesla and Agent Tesla's remote access Trojan and so forth. And of course, any of this stuff could be readily adapted to just about anything. The article I attached does have a complete list and examples of how this works. So you might want to think about a warning to all your people about this kind of TypoSquatting stuff, since it appears to be growing. Guardio Labs found a malvertising campaign, which works by pushing out essentially Google Chrome extensions, which will hijack your searches and then insert a link to one of their affiliates onto a web page. All these extensions were like basically color customization options, and they don't actually have any malicious code in them. So if you go to them and download them, there's nothing there. The campaign has been called Dormant Colors, and so far they've found 30 variants of these on the Chrome and Edge stores that have more than 1 million downloads total. And basically what happens is these various thirst trap ads, that pop up that we see all the time, redirect you to a web page that offers the thirst trap video and or download. And of course, when you try to run it, it immediately pops up a redirect that sends you to another site that says, oh, to run this, you need this extension, et cetera, please install now. So the extensions, if you approve them, then redirect you to another bunch of pages that actually sideload scripts that are run by the non-malware extensions. So they actually execute these sideloaded scripts, and the sideloaded scripts can then actually do just about anything. But one of the main functions so far has been to steal data. The extensions basically can hijack your searches. So if you search for something, they grab it and take you to a specific site they want you to see. And the particular campaign called Dormant Colors actually hijacks the victim's browsing on a list of 10,000 websites and more. They said there was actually more than 10,000. So no matter what you're trying to get to, you may not get to what you think you're getting. So obviously all these sideloaded scripts can do just about anything, and it can be changed, on the fly. There is in this article a full explanation of the behavior of this attack, and there's a video demo of the attack being run. So if you're interested in such things, please check that out. Linus Torvalds, founder of Red Hat and so forth, made a suggestion this week, which I thought was interesting. He said that the 80486 architecture belongs in a museum and should no longer be supported in the kernel. And I was like, it's still supported? But apparently it is. Remember the old days with 386 and 386SX and 286 and all that good stuff? And then along came this dramatic change in the 486 architecture. Yay. It was this big step up, to have that 486 CPU, and they even gave you little badges you could stick on your desktop to say 486 empowered. No, you probably don't, because that was really, really old. I mean, the 486 actually came out in the late 1980s and was replaced by the Pentium series in 1993. I do think Lou had an old 486 machine at his house that was still running Windows 3.1 that would actually boot up because he had all these old Fortran programs on it. I was looking for it, but I never did find it before they cleared the place out. But anyway, Linus said that their developers have a lot of work, and they have a lot more work when they have to make workarounds to keep supporting all these ancient architectures, and so maybe enough was enough. Intel actually end-of-life the 486 processor back in 2007, and they no longer actually mention it anywhere on their site. It's like it's been scrubbed from history or something, like those names of the Pharaoh that they don't want anybody to know, the nameless one or whatever. So, I mean, I don't really know why they're still supporting it in Linux. I don't really get it, because I'm like, if you're still running 486 processors, I mean, are you really planning to try to run the latest version of Linux anyway? So I pretty much agreed with him. I was like, yeah, I think enough is enough. A student the other day was showing me an extension for Visual Studio Code that you could just type in a comment and say what you wanted, and if it could find a pre-rolled piece of code that fit that need, it would actually dump that onto your editor. It was pretty cool. I mean, it was a lot like DALL-E or something. GitHub's Copilot, if you've ever used that, is very similar to this. Uses an AI inquiry, and the AI goes out and tries to find code that will fulfill this need. Again, a lot like DALL-E, where you type in, I want to see a picture of a cucumber cat hybrid or something. But in this case, you say, I'd like to see a recursion that solves, the Towers of Hanoi. And I actually tried that, and it worked, and it pulls up code, so it allows you to request this stuff on the fly. Very cool. I mean, it's a big step forward in object-oriented programming, and in artificial intelligence stuff. So it's very useful if you're a developer, I think. But this article was talking about how a couple of research papers are coming out that are talking about the effect this may have on teaching programming courses and teaching students to program. Now, in my experience, there are always groups of students who are always trying to cheat or find some angle. And I'm not saying all the students do that, but just some students do. And I've certainly seen cases where it looked like people spent a lot more time trying to find a way to cheat on their assignment than if they would have just taken the code. They just written the code. I've also seen the ones where students try to cheat by giving you code that looks like it was written by a really advanced developer, and you ask them to explain it, and they're like, Well, I don't really know. I was just working on it. I started working. I don't really know why. I'm like, well, it's really weird how your code went from like, you couldn't get through the hello world problem, and suddenly you've written something that looks like, it might have been written by a master coder, and they're like, oh no, man, I just had a revelation, I guess. Yeah, oh, good. But anyway, I do believe we're standing in the doorway of an era where there's going to be a lot of AI-generated code. I mean, it's already happening, and there's very likely going to be AI code coded by other AIs that are maybe coding new AIs, and maybe we even get to that point where the AIs are just talking amongst themselves in programming languages that we can't possibly comprehend, and of course, that's how you get Skynet. But in the meantime, I do think this is going to change how programmers learn, because it may be very useful if you just need to say, I need a pop-up window, and Majel Barrett says the warp drive engines are down, or says, yes, here it is for you, Captain, or whatever you have Majel Barrett call you when you have your system at home. But I mean, I do think students are going to want to use that approach, and they're going to argue that it's a valid approach. It doesn't really necessarily teach you how to code, which is worrisome, because if you don't understand what you're doing and you're just putting pieces together, you're not really a coder anymore. You're more of a very low-level person. But, like any good programmer who's searched for help on the internet, who knows? I mean, we all have looked at code. We've looked at code we don't understand. We've looked at Stack Overflow and looked at an answer to a question we had and went, I have no idea what they're doing, and I'm not even sure it would work. But you may have tried it anyway, right? But be careful if you're doing this, because you may actually have to explain this code and or document it. I mean, we may have to rethink how we teach basic programming to students, but I mean, basically, the question one of these papers was asking was how much code can be machine generated and still actually be considered original code? I mean, we all use libraries, we all use APIs, we all use pre-existing objects, so I don't know. We're going down that road. CISA added 2 Cisco and 4 gigabyte flaws to the known exploited vulnerabilities catalog this week. Cisco vulnerabilities impact the AnyConnect secure mobility client for Windows and can be exploited by a locally authenticated attacker, and it would allow them to execute arbitrary code and or copy files to arbitrary locations with elevated privilege. Cisco said they were not aware of any exploitation of these, and they've said that before about things that were on this list, but details and proof of concept code is available, which makes what they're saying unlikely. CISA countered this claim with, quote, they only add to this list if they have reliable evidence of exploitation. So, yeah, take that. The Gigabyte vulnerabilities impact low-level drivers in the Gigabyte App Center, the Aorus graphics engine, the Extreme Gaming Engine, and the OC Guru utility, all of which I presume are on Gigabyte motherboards. I don't really use Gigabyte motherboards in a while, so I don't know what all those things are. The exploits, though, may allow a local attacker to escalate privilege and take complete control of the system. Gigabyte claimed that these vulnerabilities, which are from 2018, did not affect their products. But then in 2020, they revised the statement and said, no, it actually does. And they did address the issue supposedly in 2020. Sophos had reported that the driver in one case was being exploited by Robinhood ransomware. So again, they're saying they don't know about this. CISA says, hey, here's some examples. Apple patched over 100 vulnerabilities with new Mac OS Ventura 13. There were it always shocks me. There were 112 CVEs listed in this security advisory for this new release, meaning they had fixed those. Updates were also released for Big Sur and Monterey at the same time, which still had vulnerabilities in those. Apple also announced patching more than 20 security flaws in iOS and iPad OS. Yeah, okay. I mean, not that it really should be surprising. Well, the ancient art of rishathra involves hands-free bobbing for bits of fermented herring floating in a tub of melted yak lard. And our next guest has one of the grand prizes for this, and he's won it more than once. Please welcome Jason Wood.
I have no idea what to make of that one. All right, everybody. Good to be back with you as always. So, if you remember back in the early days, early months of the COVID-19 pandemic, ransomware operators were running amok, taking advantage of everybody going remote. But they would run into healthcare providers and then quickly disavow, no, we're not targeting healthcare providers. Or why would we do that in a pandemic? And apparently, I even provided some free keys to decrypt things that had been encrypted up at a healthcare facility. Well, those days are long gone, and they have no problem with going after healthcare anymore, and especially according to a bulletin by the FBI and CISA, was released as a joint statement. I found this in a ZDNet article, and then moved over to look at the bulletin from there. Basically, the bulletin details some information about a relatively new ransomware group called the Dixon group, DAIXIN. I don't know, Dixon, however you want to pronounce that. Which details how the group is operating, who they're targeting, and some IOCs for their operations. Now, normally when you see these bulletins come out, they'll list, they'll give a list of verticals or industries that are being targeted, and they won't necessarily appear to have links to each other. But in this particular case, there's two: healthcare and public health providers. Those are their targets. So, perhaps Dixon will go for the scumbag trifecta and go add food banks to that list or something like that. As you can tell, I've got opinions about the ransomware folks and our e-crime adversaries. Anyway, according to the bulletin, what Dixon is going after is poorly protected VPN systems for their initial access into their victims' environments. These VPNs have a couple of things going on. Either they're missing security patches, or they're configured to allow connections with just using a username and password, no multi-factor. And, so essentially they see okay, we've got a remote vulnerability. Let's go ahead and execute that. We'll get connected, pivot into the network from there, try and get a hold of credentials from somewhere. In one intrusion that they listed in the bulletin, the group went ahead and sent out phishing emails, and then got a hold of credentials there. And then they just logged into the VPN device and then pivoted into the environment, and then just reuse those credentials to move laterally to other systems. Now, usually my experience, when I've seen like VPNs start getting targeted in particular, it seems like there's a particular vulnerability that they're going after or platform. In this particular case, there's no listing of any specific VPN platform. They're just kind of going in general. So the targeting really is on healthcare. Whatever they happen to be running is what they have running. So yeah, no targeting on the platform itself. Once they get into the network, the playbook is very similar to a lot of your other ransomware operations. They use stolen credentials to access other hosts via SSH, RDP, or other protocols to move around the environment. They deploy the ransomware. They'll try and get other credentials using credential dumping tools like Mimikatz, collect passwords that are saved in known locations like browsers and things like that. And, otherwise just try and spread around, try and elevate their access. If they can get a hold of an administrator credentials, even better. And then they'll copy the data out of the network so that they can do data extortion. And then they'll turn around and start encrypting data to deny access to, what the organization depends on. In this case, patient health information, all the stuff that they need to treat people. They also have targeted VMware ESXi hosts. So if they get a hold of credentials that allow them to access those systems, they'll log in via SSH and basically ransom entire virtual machines. They're going after the VMDKs, the VMXX files, etc. And I'm assuming you'll stop the VM and then just encrypt those files, and away we go. As I said, they are targeting patient health information for exfiltration. That's going to apply the most pressure to the victims to pay up, and both for the damages that they may get in relation to regulatory issues, but also if that data has been encrypted, they can no longer treat patients, and that becomes a real problem. And so they have maximum pressure at this point to pay out. The actor drops their ransom note, tells them how to get a hold of them via Tor, and then threatens them that, hey, you've got 5 days to respond. In fact, they have a sentence in there that says, don't bother trying to fix this on your own or calling a recovery company or anything like that. You'll just waste time and money. The Dyson group themselves is fairly new threat actor. as far as being their own group. They're reported to have been active since June of 2022, so really just a few months. I did some digging into them to see what I could find out, and the suspicion is that were an affiliate of existing ransomware groups, but they decided to break off and hang out their own shingle, keep all of that money for themselves. That's not a terribly unusual event. The way the ransomware service works, of course, is that the folks providing the ransomware as a service get a cut of the extortion or the ransom. And so in this way, it's appealing because they can just keep all of that. The ransomware itself is reportedly based off of the Babu Locker source code. So they got a hold of that source code, modified it for their own purposes. And in a couple of intrusions, the bulletin cites, in one of them they used rclone to exfiltrate the data, and in another one they used ngrok to set up a tunnel to then pipe the data out of the victim's environment. So there's a little bit of variation of the tools that they'll use for the data exfiltration. I know I started out by commenting that publicly in 2020 they would say that these ransomware groups would say, we would never do that, because people would really get bent out of shape, and people were freaking out about the load that was placed on the hospitals, and this just added to that burden. I'm not entirely certain how much they were really backing off from those environments, but regardless, at this point, they are not backing off now. According to the FBI and the complaints that they received to the Internet Crime Complaint Center, or IC3, healthcare has basically been responsible for 25% of the reports in 2022 so far. So a huge chunk of the active crimes that have been reported to them. And in 2021, healthcare accounted for 148 out of 649 total complaints to the IC3, which, to be honest with you, I looked at that number, I thought, wow, only 649 complaints. Definitely a lot more ransomware activity occurring out there than that. So that caught my attention as well. We've talked a number of times here on the show about the difficulty in protecting healthcare environments. Lots of controls around the systems, particularly anything doing treatment. This is just kind of a bad situation for anybody who is in this space. They've got these limitations on what they can do and how fast they can respond. They probably have got some limitations on their budget, how much money is willing to be set aside for security. But now this vertical is, in this case, we've got a group that is this is their playground where they're going after. Maybe this is, at least on Dyson's part, because they've decided healthcare has a greater tendency to pay out, or because these environments are difficult to defend against. They've decided that it just makes for a softer target, or maybe it's a combination of all of the above or other things. But regardless, they have decided to go after them. And they're probably not alone in this as far as threat actor groups specifically going after healthcare. And this isn't a good development for anybody. Talking to family members who work in healthcare, the doctors and nurses, they're used to using health information systems, going to a computer to find out all of the patient's history and stuff like that. You don't even have it on paper anymore on any large scale type of system or application through the medical providers. And so, that interrupts the care from the doctors and nurses. Also, the pharmacies, especially inside of hospitals, have a lot of restrictions on dispensing medications and using those information systems to do that. In fact, some medications are so tightly controlled, there's not even really a manual way to get around that. They have to use these systems to dispense certain medications. So none of this is good news for us here, either as patients or as people who are working in healthcare and trying to defend these organizations. If you're responsible for defending healthcare environments, this bulletin may be something for you to check out if you haven't already, and to pass along to other folks inside of your organization. Take a look and see in your environment, where is it possible to use multi-factor authentication that it isn't implemented yet, specifically on any kind of remote access system. If you're getting some friction preventing you from getting that deployed, this may be something to help, again, provide support to, no, really, we need to roll this out because here are what attackers are actively doing right now. Hopefully we can learn from what's happening to other organizations rather than our own. So links to the bulletin as well as the ZDNet article that I mentioned are in the show notes for you to go ahead and check it out. Worth a read to see what's going on there.
All right. Thank you, Jason. Always terrifying when you go to the hospital and start screaming 2 cc's of fentanyl stat, and they don't do anything. But it's like, yeah, don't do that. Anyway, and finally, so these scientists were trying to figure a solution to the problem in quantum computing, and one of the big problems in quantum computing is causing qubits to actually stay in a quantum state. So this has been the challenge of quantum computing all along. And if matter won't stay in a quantum state, then your qubits go away and your whole system falls apart pretty quick. So they were using random laser pulses to beam into this matter and raising it to a quantum state. And with these sort of arbitrary pulses of laser energy, they were able to raise the quantum state and keep it there for 1.5 seconds, which doesn't sound very long, but in the quantum world, that's a lot. Well, so this is the weird part of this story. For whatever reason, they decided to try the universal panacea, which is called the Fibonacci sequence. And so if you don't know, everybody's obsessed with Fibonacci numbers. It's this weird sequence. It's called the golden spiral. It's used in fractals. It does all these strange things. And this mathematician named Fibonacci came up with it. And it's a really weird thing. I mean, and there's all these different uses for it and whatever. But they decided to beam the laser pulses instead of being just like random, I guess. They were beaming Fibonacci sequences. I don't know if they were using that for the timing or the length of the beam or whatever, but they did that, and it raised the quantum, maintained the quantum state to 5.5 seconds. So maybe the Fibonacci sequence really is the secret combination code to unlock the matrix or something. So who knows? We'll probably find out. And that's the news. We'll see you next time on the Security Weekly News.